Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel once again. Please subscribe and let's get started. Alright, so let's talk about something happening in my home continent, Africa. You know, whenever the world talks about Africa, it's usually one of two stories, doom and gloom. A magical, exotic place with lions roaming the streets, which by the way, only happens sometimes, and usually only when my cousin leaves the gate open. But every now and then, a leader steps up and cuts through all that noise, with a message so clear, so powerful, you just have to stop and listen. That leader right now is Botswana's president, Duma Boko. This isn't just another politician in a suit, this is a man who is quickly earning a reputation for being, let's say, refreshingly blunt. He's the kind of guy who doesn't just read the speech someone else wrote. He says what he actually thinks. In a world filled with carefully crafted political statements that mean absolutely nothing, President Boko is becoming known for his honesty and his focus on getting things done. Think of him as the friend in your group who, while everyone else is debating where to eat for an hour, just stands up and says, "We're going for tacos, get in the car." He's not trying to win a popularity contest with flowery language. He's looking at the real problems facing his country and his continent and asking the one question that matters, so, what are we actually going to do about it? This straight-talking approach is starting to make waves, not just in Botswana but across Africa and beyond. People are beginning to see him as a symbol of a new kind of African leadership, one that's less about ceremony and more about results. His style is a direct challenge to the old way of doing things. For decades, the story of African development has been a story of conferences, summits, 5-year plans. So many plans. But President Boko is looking at that library and saying, "This is great, but where are the buildings?" He's tapping his watch, looking at the world, and signaling that the time for just talking is officially over. So picture this. You're at one of those big fancy international meetings, everyone's wearing a suit. The coffee is probably terrible. Speaker after speaker getting up and talking in circles about synergistic frameworks and multi-stakeholder paradigms. You know the vibe. It's the political equivalent of your phone's terms and conditions. A lot of words, but nobody really knows what they just agreed to. Then President Duma Boko gets to the microphone. He looks out at the room full of world leaders, diplomats, and aid organizations, and he doesn't pull any punches. He basically says, "We are done waiting. Africa is not a charity case. We are tired of being a perpetual project. We have the plans, we have a mountain of them. What we need now are results. Results, clean water, results, reliable electricity, results, decent jobs." This wasn't just a casual comment, it was a declaration. For generations, African nations have been presented with grand plans designed by experts far away. Millennium Development Goals, Sustainable Development Goals Agenda, 2063. Each one comes with beautiful brochures and inspiring slogans, but on the ground, in the villages and the cities, people are still asking for clean water, reliable electricity, and a decent job. Duma Boko's message was simple. The gap between promises made in conference halls and daily reality has become too wide to ignore. He was speaking for the millions who feel their future is stuck in a permanent state of being planned. The new currency is action. The new benchmark is tangible, measurable progress. The time for talk is over. The time for building has begun. To really get why this was such a big deal, you have to understand who was in the room, or at least who the message was for. President Duma Boko delivered these powerful remarks during a high-profile session at the United Nations General Assembly in New York. This isn't your local town hall meeting. This is the Super Bowl of international diplomacy. You've got heads of state, top-tier diplomats, the heads of the World Bank, and the heads of the IMF, and leaders of the biggest non-profits in the world. When you speak here, you are literally speaking to the entire planet. Everyone who has a stake in global development, finance, and politics is listening. So, choosing this stage was a deliberate and strategic move. He wasn't just talking to his fellow African leaders, though they were certainly a key audience. He was looking them in the eye and saying, "The world is watching us, our people are waiting, we need to hold ourselves accountable first." It was a call for unity and a shared sense of urgency among the continent's leadership. but his primary target was the international community, the wealthy nations of the global north, the international financial institutions, and the vast network of aid organizations that have shaped the narrative of African development for decades. He was challenging the top-down approach that has defined international aid for so long. You know the one. A team of experts from Geneva or Washington flies in, does a 2-week assessment, and leaves behind a 200-page report on how to fix a country's entire healthcare system. He was telling these global power players that true partnership means listening to local leaders, investing in local institutions, and trusting that Africans know what is best for Africa. His message to them was clear. Africa is not a risk to be managed. It is the biggest opportunity of the 21st century. You have to build factories, not just boardrooms. So why did President Duma Boko's words hit so hard? Because he was saying out loud what millions of Africans have been feeling for years. Imagine you're a young graduate in Lagos. You're smart. You're ambitious. You have a degree. You have an idea for a tech startup that could create hundreds of jobs. But the electricity is so unreliable that you can't keep your servers running. The internet is slow and expensive. Getting a business loan is nearly impossible unless you know somebody who knows somebody. It's the frustration of a farmer in rural Ghana. A new government plan is announced promising a road to the market. Years go by, but the road is never built. This story repeats millions of times across the continent, bustling markets in Kinshasa, universities in South Africa. The plans look great on paper. Promise, build new schools. Promise, pave thousands of kilometers of roads. Promise, create millions of jobs. But funding gets lost in corruption. Political will fades after the election. Projects prove too complicated and disconnected from local reality. The plan becomes a dusty document on a shelf. This is the core issue, a growing disconnect between the political elite and everyday people. President Duma Boko's speech gave voice to this widespread sentiment. When a message is that direct, the reactions are going to be just as strong. And honestly, they were. Across Africa there was this almost immediate and overwhelming sense of finally, someone said it. On social media, from Cape Town to Cairo, young people, activists, entrepreneurs shared clips of the speech. The hashtag started trending, and you could just feel the energy building. For a generation that's, deeply connected online and pretty skeptical of political rhetoric, Duma Boko's bluntness was like a breath of fresh air. Now, among his fellow African leaders, the reaction was a bit more mixed, as you can imagine. It was kind of like showing up to a party and calling out the host for not having any snacks. Some leaders, especially those from a younger, more reform-minded generation, publicly praised his courage. However, other more established leaders were likely a bit uncomfortable. The international community, the aid agencies and Western governments he was directly addressing, had a very interesting reaction. Publicly, of course, everyone agreed with him. Nobody is going to stand up and say, "No, we love inefficient plans that lead to nothing." But behind the scenes you can bet there were some nervous conversations. It puts pressure on them to change their methods, to cede control, and to become more accountable for the outcomes of the billions of dollars they spend. For investors and the global business community, the message was heard loud and clear. Many saw it as a positive signal. So the reaction was a mix of optimism and a clear understanding that the rules of the game are changing. To understand the urgency behind President Duma Boko's message, you just have to look at the continent itself. It's a place of incredible contrast, kind of like a real-life tale of two cities, but on a continental scale. Look at Rwanda. 25 years ago, it was a nation devastated by genocide. Today, its capital, Kigali, is one of the cleanest and safest cities in Africa. They focused on national unity, technology, zero tolerance for corruption. Then you have the story of Ethiopia's economic transformation over the past 2 decades. For a long time, the name Ethiopia made people think of famine. But the government made a massive, sustained push to build infrastructure. Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, new light rail system in the capital, Ethiopian Airlines expanded into a global giant. But then, there's the other side of the story, the one that really fuels the frustration. Take the Democratic Republic of Congo, for example. The DRC is arguably the richest country on Earth in terms of natural resources. It has the potential to power the entire continent with hydropower. There have been countless plans and billions of dollars in aid aimed at harnessing this wealth for its people. Yet, due to decades of conflict, corruption, poor governance, the DRC remains one of the poorest and least developed nations in the world. And this contrast exists everywhere. You can see it in Nigeria, a powerhouse of culture, music, entrepreneurship, with a booming tech scene in Lagos known as Yabacon Valley. Yet the country struggles with an unstable power grid, security challenges, and vast oil wealth that hasn't translated into widespread prosperity. These two Africas, the one of dynamic progress and the one of frustrating stagnation, exist side by side. President Duma Boko's message is a call to action to make the first story the only story. It's a plea to learn from the successes like Rwanda, Botswana, and to finally solve the problems that have held back places like the DRC for far too long. This is about making steady, tangible progress every single day. Okay, so a great speech has been made, everyone's fired up. But as we all know, words are easy. The real work, the hard part, is turning that powerful message into reality. The challenge ahead is massive. It's not just on the international community, it's on African leaders themselves. The first and biggest hurdle is governance. This means tackling the monster that is corruption, head on. It's not just about a few bad apples, it's about systemic corruption that leaches money from public projects, creates endless bureaucracy, and destroys public trust. The next major challenge is translating national plans into local action. It's one thing to have a grand strategy for agricultural development sitting in the capital city. It's another thing entirely to make sure that a small-scale farmer in a remote village gets the seeds, fertilizer, and training she needs. This requires building effective local government, empowering community leaders, and creating feedback loops so that leaders know what is actually working on the ground and what isn't. Then there's the economic challenge. To deliver results, you need money. While demanding better partnerships from the world is crucial, African nations also need to get better at generating their own revenue. This means expanding their tax bases in a fair way, stopping illicit financial flows that drain billions from the continent every year, and adding value to their own raw materials. Why just export raw cocoa beans when you can build a factory to make and export chocolate? Why sell raw cobalt when you can be part of the battery manufacturing supply chain? This shift from extraction to production is fundamental. It's the difference between being a continent that's rich in resources and a continent that's rich in people and prosperity. And finally, the challenge is one of mindset. For this to work, there needs to be a continent-wide commitment to accountability. Citizens need to demand more from their leaders and hold them accountable at the ballot box. President Duma Boko has thrown down the gauntlet. The challenge now is for his fellow leaders, and for all sectors of African society, to pick it up and join him in the difficult, messy, but absolutely essential work of building the future they all say they want. So, what does this all mean for Africa's future? If more leaders follow President Duma Boko's lead and truly commit to a culture of action, the future could be radically different from the past. Imagine an Africa where the storyline is no longer about aid, poverty, but innovation, trade, and investment. Imagine a continent that is not just a recipient of technology, but a creator of it. A future where the world's fastest-growing cities are also its most livable, powered by clean energy and connected by high-speed rail. A future built on results means a young girl born in a village has the same access to a quality education, healthcare as a child born in a major city. It means entrepreneurs can get their ideas off the ground without being suffocated by red tape or a lack of electricity. It means farmers can feed the continent and the world and get a fair price for their labor. This is not about building a perfect Africa overnight. It's about making steady, tangible progress every single day. It's about paving one more road, connecting one more village to the grid, and funding one more startup. This shift in focus, from plans to results, is ultimately about restoring dignity. It's about Africa taking its rightful place on the world stage, not as a problem to be solved, but as a global leader full of solutions. The continent has the youngest population in the world. This can either be its greatest challenge or its most powerful asset. If that energy is harnessed, if those aspirations are met with real opportunities, that demographic dividend could unleash a wave of progress and creativity that will change the entire world. President Duma Boko's message is a spark. The hope is that this spark will light a fire across the continent. A fire of impatience, a fire of ambition, and a fire of action. The path forward is not easy. It will require immense political will, courage, and hard work. If that spirit continues, the next chapter in Africa's story won't be written in a conference hall or in a development plan. It will be built, brick, by the hands of its own people. And that is a future worth being excited about.